Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Royal,
My name is Merel Zaya.
and thank you for joining us today on the NHL OPENions Podcast on this Wednesday, quite an eventful Wednesday, I'd say. I guess let's jump right into it. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so big news right here. Ryan Johansen dealt to the Predators for Seth Jones. I think this is quite a big deal. What do you think of this, Steven?
Yeah, this is crazy. I mean, we were talking about this last week. We didn't even mention the name Seth Jones. We were thinking it's probably gonna take like a Shea Weber
Or a Yossi.
or a Yossi to make this. Just shocked to see two young potential superstars getting swapped.
Yeah, you don't see these trades very often. I mean, Johansen's, I believe, 23 and Seth Jones is 21. So when you make trades like these, it's hard to say because there's so much potential with both guys. So you could end up either losing the trade or winning the trade big time. But it's hard to tell right now who's the winner, who's the loser. I mean, they both fit the needs of each team.
I was just gonna say I don't think there will be a loser out of this trade.
Yeah,
I think they both traded for need.
That's true. I mean, Nashville desperately needs offensive help. Johansen's a good playmaker, and then Columbus needs a defenseman. So Seth Jones, he's gonna be a stud defenseman, and he should be the number one guy there now.
Oh, for sure, and probably for time to come too. Let's see what else happened today. Vincent Lecavalier traded to the Kings.
I mean, I was kind of shocked by that just because Los Angeles doesn't have much cap space. But so going to Los Angeles is Lecavalier and Luke Schenn, and going to Philly is Jordan Weal and a third-round pick in 2016. But I should mention that Philadelphia retains both the salaries of Lecavalier and Luke Schenn at 50%.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. I mean, I never thought Philadelphia is in a potential to be retaining salary.
Yeah, so Lecavalier's cap hits ends up being 2.25 for the remainder of this year, and then 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018, and then Luke Schenn's cap hit is 1.8 million just for the rest of this season, and then he's a UFA.
Yeah, exactly. LA is going all in right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely interesting. I think mainly because now they're kind of handicapped in terms of having a Cavalier. It's only 2.25 million, yeah, but they still have Kopitar to resign and Lucic. I mean, based on seeing this, they're gonna have Lecavalier on the books. I think they're gonna either let Lucic walk or they're gonna have to figure out how to trade like maybe a Dustin Brown or a.
Well, they're gonna have to. I mean, if you're looking at their roster, they don't have too many expirings.
Yeah.
Kind of scares me.
So, yeah, I think Lucic might walk, or they're going to have to figure out a way to trade maybe Brown or Gabrick. I don't know, but we'll see what happens there.
I really like this deal in Philadelphia's perspective. I don't like that they retained half their salary for both players. I mean, I know Luke Schenn comes off the books, but this is desperately a team, I've said, that really needs to unload some of these players.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the way I look at it is if you had Lecavalier there for 3 more years and he's not going to be playing, I mean, you have him for the full cap hit just sitting there not playing. So at least this way he's not playing on your team, and then you get rid of half of the cap hit and you can bring in a young guy and replace him down the road.
Exactly, yeah.
So it totally makes sense in both.
I mean,
for both organizations.
Does this trade make LA a Stanley Cup contender for you?
I think it gives them depth. It definitely gives them depth, but it's hard to say. It just depends how Luke Schenn, in my opinion, fills the role. Could he be that one defenseman he was supposed to be in Toronto, or is he just going to be a fringe 6th, 7th defenseman? It's hard to say right now, but I think he can provide them with physicality in the back end, especially in a Western Conference. So that's going to be useful to them for sure.
I agree with you on that. I just personally don't think the Stanley Cup's going through the Pacific Division this year. I mean, LA could be a product of that. They obviously are the number 1 team in that division. Most likely will end up in that one spot there. I just think overall, this doesn't give them much more of a chance. This is not much of a different team from last year.
Oh, I agree with you in that sense, but since you did mention the Pacific Division is weaker, I think LA is gonna kind of coast through the regular season without having much trouble, and I don't think they're gonna be firing on all cylinders, and they're gonna make it. While the other teams in the Western Conference and Central Division are going to be battling hard. So by the time it's playoff times, I think those Central teams will be banged up. So I think LA has the advantage there, especially considering they've gone far before. So I'd have to disagree with you from that perspective. I think they're a solid contender right now.
It'll be well, we'll have to wait and find out for that. What do you think of their former teammate Mike Richards heading over to the Washington Capitals on a 1-year, $1 million contract?
I mean, I think this is a smart move by the Capitals. Whenever you see them go to the playoffs, it looks like they lack experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's mainly due to the fact that they always get eliminated pretty early. So I think Mike Richards being there, he's definitely going to help them with experience. I don't see how this deal could hurt them. It's just for the remaining of this season. And then he provides them with great depth, face-offs, checking, all that sort of stuff. Good leader in the room. So I think this is a great signing by the Capitals.
Yeah, I agree. You have to imagine this is just a matter of time that he would find a home. This is just too much experience here for me to let this guy walk. You knew a GM's going to take a chance on him.
I mean, Mike Richards to me is a hell of a player. I just don't think he was a hell of a player at what he was previously getting, which I think it was around $4.5 million.
So something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, and for the amount of term he was getting it, I mean, maybe before he was worth it, but the style he plays is just hard to do that for your entire career, especially at his size. He's not a big guy, so I think he's a hell of a player, and he still has a lot to go. But this is a good move by the Caps.
I agree. I'm definitely a sucker for second chances here. Now, moving on here, let's take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Well, this was probably going to be the main thing we were going to talk about had all this not happened earlier tonight.
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the big thing in Tampa right now is Jonathan Drouin. And I don't know, would you be concerned with John Cooper there? I mean, you're looking at all these issues. First it was Marty St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's Steven Stamkos. He's tired of playing center. We discussed this before in the other show. He wants to play center, but he's put on the wing. And then now you hear Drouin wants out because he's not getting ice time.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely do think I'd be concerned with John Cooper. I mean, if you take a look at it, first, I think a lot of people aren't even considering St. Louis. I'm glad you brought him up. And a lot of people were probably thinking, Stamkos just complaining. You do kind of see favoritism there towards the triplets line. But, when all these players are just adding up, this is not looking good for the head coach.
I agree with you in that sense. I think it's hard for me to comment on the St. Louis issue because that kind of just occurred real quickly and they traded him off. The issue didn't last very long.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed the Stamkos issue last time. I mean, I think as a coach, he just feels Stamkos is better on the wing. But now with the Drouin thing, I think Drouin, he's complaining a lot. I mean, he gets 14 minutes of ice time. I think, to me, that's enough to get you decent offensive totals. It depends who you play with, but he's complaining about ice time. He's averaged 14 minutes. I think that's a decent amount where you should put up good amount of points. So I don't know. I think his issue is just injury, and then when he comes back from injury, he's always been struggling. And I think Cooper doesn't like him because he doesn't play a two-way game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you on that. I personally don't think he's going to be a Lightning for too much longer. I mean, had the Johansen trade not happened, I was actually going to suggest that, maybe they could let Stamkos walk or let a Drouin walk. I thought they would pursue a Johansen, but clearly that's off the table right now.
So I think the interesting thing for me here is, like I mentioned, Drouin is not a two-way player, so I think they send him to Syracuse just to get him his confidence back, maybe learn some defensive play. But I'm noticing a trend in Tampa Bay. Mm-hmm. Stamkos isn't at center probably because he's not really as solid of a two-way player as maybe Filppula or Johnson. I think Drouin is kind of in the doghouse there because he's not a two-way player. I mean, I think Stevie Y is a big fan of him. I mean, if you look at it, if he wasn't a fan of him, he could have easily gone to Seth Jones and drafted him at 3rd overall rather than Drouin. And there is some scouts I was hearing where saying they had Drouin rated ahead of Nathan McKinnon. I mean, this guy had big numbers.
Yes.
This guy had big numbers in Halifax, and they were saying it was due to McKinnon, but he went back the next year and put up 108 points in 46 games, and McKinnon was not then in Colorado. So this guy can do it by himself. Just I don't know if he's ready to do it at the NHL level.
Do you think it's that he can't do it at the NHL level, or do you think he just can't do it in Tampa Bay? I personally think this guy goes somewhere else, he's going to get his opportunity. If this is a Toronto Maple Leaf next year, you know Babcock's not going to be sending him down to the minors. I think this guy instantly becomes, I wouldn't say top 6, maybe even on the third line. I don't think he can come back to Tampa Bay right now mentally.
I totally agree with you. It's just hard to say if he comes in, what does he play? Because he can play center or wing. Honestly, I don't think he's a centerman at the NHL level right now, just because of his size and lack of two-way play. I mean, if you look at his NHL stats, he has 40 points in 89 games. Those are decent totals. Like, I mean, those aren't great offensive totals. So if he's not putting up that many points and he's a liability on the two-way play, then you can understand why Cooper wouldn't be a big fan of his. But I'm glad you mentioned the Leafs, because I'm hearing though that's a team that maybe should consider him just because of their position and their rebuilding and so on. But I think the issue with that is they already have too many of these small skilled guys. I mean, look how many they have. They have Nylander, they have Marner, they have Kapanen. I mean, do you really need a Drouin there now?
Well, what I would do is I would actually propose a trade, obviously. You're right. The Leafs are just piling them up. Let's just look at the Olympics. You never hear the Leafs players in the headlines. Like Kapanen there, winning it for Finland. Yeah. You know, they have a lot of potential here to make some trades.
I agree with you. I just think if they're getting Drouin, I think they need to maybe look at what they do with some of their other prospects, because they just be accumulating skilled guys, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think you can just have 6 small guys playing on your top 2 lines. Maybe trade for a defensive prospect, or make sure they draft a defenseman at the draft. I mean, it's hard to say, but I think also I don't think Stevie Y would trade to the Maple Leafs just because of the divisional issue as well. I mean, that's a trade that could end up biting you back. Just imagine if Boston traded Tyler Seguin to someone in their division, what that could be. And this has the potential to be that type of deal where Drouin goes somewhere and has maybe not as big of an impact as Seguin, but definitely creates a huge impact.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. How about this? Let me propose to you a trade. If I'm Toronto and you're Steve Yzerman, if I'm offering you Kadri for Drouin, what do you say?
Not a chance I'm making that trade.
You're not, despite Drouin publicly saying he wants out.
I'm not making that trade. If Drouin publicly states he wants to, but he doesn't want to play for my team anymore, I mean, I still have power over him. After this year, he's still on my books. He's not an RFA. He doesn't have arbitration rights. He's still under my authority. I mean, and if he doesn't want to play well in Syracuse, he's only hurting his value and how other teams view him. So I'm not trading for Kadri just because if I get Kadri now, who says I'm going to be able to re-sign him next year, especially with Stamkos? Especially with Stamkos being another issue. I mean, I don't think you'd be able to sign Stamkos, Kadri, have Tyler Johnson there, have Hedman, and then you just have a whole bunch of guys. And we were just mentioning two-way play. I don't think Cooper would be very fond of Kadri's two-way play, to be honest with you. I mean, he has improved under Mike Babcock, but I just, contractually speaking, I just don't see how this trade makes sense. And I think Kadri's like kind of an enigma. You don't know what you're getting out of him. I think he's in a similar situation as Drouin. He's been in a similar situation as Drouin earlier in his career. Yeah, but if you think Drouin turns into a Kadri, I think you could maybe call him a bust, being drafted third overall.
You're right. Seeing it, well, if Kadri wasn't too far behind him where he was drafted. I think right now with Kadri, it's funny. We still don't know what he is. Like, he's put up the numbers.
Yeah.
And he's right now showing you, well, he has that pest mentality. Obviously, he's not the same player under Babcock. I don't know if that's a bad thing. Generally speaking, if you're not putting up points, you better be playing a complete game, which I think he is overall.
I agree totally with you there. I mean, he's playing a style now where it doesn't hurt his team.
Mm-hmm.
If he's not scoring, he's not hurting his team. Whereas before, he did score, but maybe if he generated 2 points a game, maybe he cost them 3 goals.
You're right.
So, yeah, I like the way he's playing. But to me, Kadri for Drouin, if I'm Stevie Y, that does not cut it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even close. What teams do you think should go for Drouin? Like, what other teams? I mean, there's a bunch of teams I could list off of that he'd be a perfect fit for in their current situations.
Well, it's funny. Nashville would have been one.
Yeah.
Probably not anymore.
Yeah.
They already got a playmaker there.
Exactly.
Johansen. Looking down the list of teams, let's see. It's tough, generally speaking. I don't think any team would reject Drouin.
That's a good point. I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about how he played with McKinnon in Halifax, so maybe you look at a Colorado.
That would be a nice one.
So if I was maybe Colorado, I go to Stevie Yzerman and I tell him, okay, send me Drouin and maybe I'll take on Matt Carl. I'll help you out. I'll take Matt Carl off your book. So what is that, about $5.5 million? Let's see.
Yeah, that would definitely.
Yeah, $5.5 million off your books for the next 3 years. I mean, then you basically lower the amount of assets you have to give to Tampa Bay because you're saving them $5.5 million. So you give them the flexibility to sign.
So we're playing that game then.
Yeah. So if I'm Colorado, because you always hear Colorado, they need a left-handed defenseman. I mean, Matt Carl isn't a prime-time defenseman. He was supposed to be a good defenseman. He was earlier before, but I think maybe if he goes to Colorado, he could get rejuvenated and play well, and you end up winning that trade.
Well, I think anything defensive if Colorado takes back would help them.
Yeah. Another team I could probably see Drouin going to is like maybe in New Jersey.
That would be a good fit.
I think that would make a lot of sense. New Jersey's not really an offensive team. They've been scoring more goals this year, but he's definitely a guy that they should take a look at. I mean, honestly, there's a lot of teams. It just depends what you can offer. And Philadelphia, for example, they like their French guys. Imagine Giroux, Drouin, and then maybe Voracek playing together.
Yeah, that would be a nice lineup there. It's funny, we tend to put Philadelphia in almost any trade talk or
basically,
trade rumor. What about a team like Edmonton? Do you think they're trying to shake things up there? Just believe it or not, they don't have much cap space left. Do you think Edmonton would be willing to move over, say a Hopkins? Obviously not Hopkins right for Drouin, but one of those first rounders they have.
I mean,
just a change of scenery.
That's an interesting scenario to put in. I mean, but I think that what goes for Tampa Bay is if you're trading you can't really trade for a Hopkins because you got $6 million coming on your books. So I don't think that really helps them. I was gonna maybe suggest a Nail Yakupov plus for Drouin, but I mean, how would Cooper react to Nail Yakupov being there? I mean, there's a lot of complications. I mean, I don't think Edmonton needs any more skill. I think they have enough of it. If you look at Hopkins and Eberle, they're probably similar style players to Drouin, so I don't think
that's true.
I don't think it really makes sense for him to go there at this point. It would certainly create a lot of buzz. I mean, you have McDavid and Drouin. That would certainly be crazy.
That would be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, another scenario where I could see him going to is maybe could you look at San Jose?
San Jose, that would be an interesting one there.
Because you always hear Patty Marleau was saying he wanted out. Maybe he'd be willing to go to Tampa Bay. I mean, obviously you'd have to figure out the numbers. I mean, I think it would take Patty Marleau and something else to get Drouin.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's another place I could see him being a fit because San Jose's in that process where they're not really rebuilding, but at the same time they are. Like they're basically either gonna sneak into the playoffs or they're just gonna miss.
Yeah.
They're that type of team right now. So I think Drouin going there would make sense, and he'd be surrounded by a couple like guys like Pavelski who could help him be a pro, Joe Thorne, and so on.
Yeah, that's definitely a team that like they have all the offensive firepower they could ever need, but it's just something's off there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there.
Now let's move on to this All-Star game, if we can still call it that. Maybe like All-Star festival or tournament.
Yeah. So the NHL just announced their rosters today.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at the Atlantic Division, you have Bergeron going, you have Yager going, you have Komarov going for the Leafs. I mean, that's definitely something you don't see every day. It's really interesting that he goes, and I think out of all the Leafs, he deserves to be there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You have Dylan Larkin going from Detroit. I really like that too.
Yeah,
that makes sense to me there. I mean, he's the only guy there that's kind of generating a lot of buzz, and it's crazy that he does it at his age, 19 years old.
That's true.
You don't hear Detroit having any 19-year-olds on their roster, so just think about how much of a special player he is. And then Ryan O'Reilly from Buffalo, I think that makes sense too. Jack Eichel hasn't put up the points.
No, he really hasn't.
Yeah, so O'Reilly makes sense, and then Stamkos goes for Tampa, Ekblad for Florida, Carlson for Ottawa, Subban for Montreal, Bishop for Tampa again, and then Luongo being the other goalie, and for Florida. I mean, for the most part in the Atlantic Division, these do make sense. Montreal, I mean, PK Subban, he hasn't been that offensive guy this year, but
no.
I would say he's been their most consistent player, so that makes sense to me as well.
For sure. I mean, right now, it's funny, whenever you talk about best goalie in the game, a lot of people would not think Carey Price. His playoffs, bust in the playoffs, all this. I think just to look at what are they? I think they've lost 13 of their last 15 games.
Yeah.
I think that just proves Carey Price the best goaltender in the game.
I agree with you. I mean, last year Price did establish himself as the best player in the game. I mean, and just by how their regular season's going right now, you could tell what kind of impact he has on this team. I mean, if you take Carey Price out of that net like you have right now,
mm-hmm.
you just see like this team looks lost. Like,
it's just.
However, at the same time, you also have to consider they don't really have any legitimate NHL goalies compared to every other team in the league. So
yeah, that's
so I think you also have to be cautious of that. I mean, they have below average goaltenders in there, so I think that obviously has an effect. But
13 of 15.
Yeah, I mean, with Montreal, like one game you see they score, but they let in a lot of goals, and in another game they get a lot of saves, but
mm-hmm.
they can't seem to score. So just something's not clicking there, and I'm sure it would make things easier if Price came back. So let's look at the Central Division now. So
Central Division, we got Jamie Benn. That's a given.
Yeah, 100%.
You got Matt Duchene. You got Patrick Kane as the captain there. Tyler Seguin, of course. Tarasenko, Jonathan Taves, Dustin Byfuglien on D, Roman Josi, Shea Weber. That's also a given there. And then you got Devin Dubnyk and Pekka Rinne in net. I think that this is probably the best team that's in this tournament.
I agree with you. I mean, they don't have John Scott, so that's automatically not a handicap for them in terms of skill. Something I have to disagree here. I mean, Jonathan Taves, I love him as a player, but he just hasn't been there this year. I mean, if I was making these teams, and if I'm doing a 3-on-3 tournament, I'd rather see Artemi Panarin on the same team with Patrick Kane than maybe a Johnny Taves.
No, for sure. Some of these you gotta say they didn't get them right, especially for given it's a 3-on-3.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a knock on Jonathan Taves. It's just the type of year and type of player Artemi Panarin is. I mean, I would have loved to see him in this tournament.
For sure, you're right about that. Let's look at the Metropolitan.
So you got Nick Backstrom going in for Washington, and then Claude Giroux, Evgeny Malkin, Alex Ovechkin, Brandon Saad, Johnny Tavares, and then on D you have Justin Falk, Chris Letang, Ryan McDonough, Braden Holtby, and Corey Schneider. So, I mean, with any of these teams, they look like great teams.
Oh yeah.
From Columbus, I mean, I was gonna say, oh, what has Brendan Saad done this year? But what has anyone on Columbus done this year? So, I mean, you can't really argue that. Evgeny Malkin, I don't know. I think Pittsburgh's just struggled so much out of maybe to see, instead of Malkin being there, maybe a Kuznetsov. Then you have a Kuznetsov,
Yes.
Ovechkin, and Backstrom line going with the Washington guys.
Well, that feels like a snub to me because you're right. I mean, I don't know if it's just because they all play on the same team.
Yeah, I mean, you just watched Kuznetsov yesterday. It's just what he did against Boston. He had a hell of a game. I mean, I would have just loved to seen him here. I don't really agree with Malkin being there, but I would have to say he's Pittsburgh's best forward.
No, for sure. Crosby's definitely something's off with him this year.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at Taves, he hasn't put up great numbers, but
pretty much you know what you're getting with Jonathan Taves.
But with Crosby, I mean, he hasn't put up great numbers, and you'd expect him to, especially with Kessel being supposedly there on his wing. I think partly what goes into this decision is the fact that maybe other years Crosby just doesn't show up to the All-Star game. He kind of forgoes it. So I think whereas Jonathan Taves shows up to the games, they're like, okay, we'll put him in. He's a good ambassador.
That's true.
Crosby hasn't been there, so they're like, we won't even waste your time.
I agree with you on that. And finally, let's go on to the amazing Pacific team. So we got Johnny Gaudreau, which is the best 3-on-3 player, you have to say. It's just crazy anytime he's on the ice there.
Exactly, yeah.
We got Taylor Hall, we got Joe Pavelski, got Corey Perry, captained by John Scott, Daniel Sedin. On defense, we got Brent Burns, Drew Doughty, Mark Giordano, and on defense, John Gibson and Jonathan Quick. Where do we even begin with Pacific?
Okay, so, I mean, there's a couple of crazy things going on here. Headlined by John Scott being the captain. I mean, I can't really blame the guy. He got voted in. It's not like he didn't promote himself saying, "Oh, vote me," doing all that type of stuff.
There's a player. Who's that player?
It was Rory Fitzpatrick.
Yes. Yeah. Did they disqualify him for that? I don't know. What do you think of this John Scott thing?
I mean, hey, it was legitimate. Mm-hmm. They said the Vans could vote players in. They did, and this is what happened. I mean, if you're John Scott, what do you do there? If you're in his position, do you say, no, I don't want to go to the All-Star game?
No.
Hey, I'm pretty sure if anyone else was in this position, they'd be like, oh, I want to go to the All-Star game. But sitting back here on my couch, it's easy to say, oh, I would have just said, let someone else go instead of me.
No, exactly. I mean, just look. This is the perspective that got me thinking about it. John Scott makes $500,000 a year. If the Pacific were to win this, each player gets $100,000.
Exactly.
So put yourself in that position.
Yeah, exactly.
A player that would never get this chance otherwise.
Exactly. Plus, just imagine the experience you get for yourself and your family. I mean, I can't blame him. He got voted in. It's not like he did anything wrong. So
what I have more of an issue with is Jaromir Jagr saying he doesn't want to play, which pushed people to vote for him. So that's out of spite kind of thing. John Scott never came out and said, "Oh, don't vote for me or vote for me."
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, with Jagr's case, it's kind of funny. He didn't want to play, but he got voted in. But even if he didn't get voted in, I think he still would have made it just based on the year he's had.
No, for sure.
So if we look at the rest of this team, I mean, this is probably the weakest division in hockey right now. It is.
By far it is.
I mean, after the John Scott thing, the second most interesting thing to me is John Gibson going to the All-Star game. I mean,
that doesn't make sense.
He hasn't even played 20 games this year, and he's going to
that absolutely doesn't. I mean, both entries for Anaheim don't make sense to me. I know
you have to get one guy in there. I mean, I was gonna maybe suggest honestly, no one on Anaheim is playing well. No. If I was gonna suggest someone, it might have been Sami Vatanen.
Yeah,
he's put up decent offensive numbers compared to how his team's scoring, and he's a defenseman, and he'd be a nice fit in this. He's a small defenseman. Exactly. But I mean, you can't put Vatanen in there and then kick out Brent Burns or Drew Doughty.
No, that's true.
And then, I mean, the way I look at it is if you have John Gibson going to the game, then don't put Corey Perry because he hasn't been there.
No,
Or if you have Corey Perry already representing Anaheim, don't put John Gibson. Maybe put for example, Martin Jones from San Jose.
Yeah. No, that kills me. I mean, I know he's playing hot right now. He's gotten them. Well, I mean, anyone in the Pacific has a chance to make the playoffs, but you're right. He's played less than 20 games. He's just on a resurgence right now, but I don't think that's enough for me to get him into the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But it just speaks to, I guess it speaks to how weak the division is and how weak the goaltenders
That's true.
have been there. So
I can't get Kari Ramo in there as much as I'd want to.
yeah, exactly. So that, I mean, you can't really say anything about that.
Is there anything else you want to add?
No, so we were gonna discuss with Columbus right now trading Johansen. I mean, they're basically poised to look like they're coming in last overall.
You still think they're coming in last overall?
Well, you look at it now, they just lost their best offensive player. You look at the year Nick Foligno had last year. I mean, if Nick Foligno wasn't playing with Ryan Johansen last year, he would not have put up the numbers he put up, and he would not have the contract he has right now.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you on that one. I think they just made so much out of Nick Foligno. I mean, we kind of figured from Ottawa, we knew what kind of player he is.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Foligno on any other team, if he's playing... I mean, on Columbus, he was playing on their first line last year, but if he's on any other team, he's probably a third-line winger. If you're weak down the wing, or if you have an injury, he's maybe a second-line winger, and he's a guy that probably gets you max 20 goals.
Yeah.
I mean, that's max. I mean, he's an average player in my opinion.
Yes.
But he's very competitive. I like that about him.
No, for sure.
But I mean, yeah. So I think Columbus is in trouble going forward. I mean, they did get Seth Jones, but you just look at the contracts they have there. They have Clarkson, and then they have Foligno getting overpaid. I mean, if you look at it, who gets the offense done? And I think they have to be hoping for. They got Austin Matthews right now they draft him. They come in last. They win the lottery, and then they draft Matthews, so he replaces Johansson. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for right now, because outside of that, all their forwards are kind of two-way guys. Two-way guys are their power forwards. You don't really have that ultra-skilled guy there anymore.
No, I agree with you on that. What I do disagree with you is I don't think they're coming last. I think it's going to be Buffalo. What I'm basing it off of is just strength of goaltender. If Bobrovsky stays healthy, there's no way this team is coming in last.
That's a very good point. I mean, you look at it now, Columbus has 41 games played. They're at 33 points. But Buffalo has 40 games played, and they're at 34 points. I mean, I agree with you in that sense, because if Bobrovsky comes back, and then you look at Buffalo's goaltending situation, they have no one in net, with all due respect to the guys they have there. I mean, it's like, you look at their goaltending, it's like they were trying to come last on purpose, like they did tried last year.
I completely forgot they even had Robin Leonard.
Well,
been injured.
Yeah. I mean, but it's crazy if Buffalo comes in last and they got Austin Matthews. I don't know what to say there. I feel like Buffalo would slowly start to be the new Edmonton. But you'd hope they don't do as poorly as they have done in the past.
I feel Buffalo is way closer than Edmonton was heading into this season.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but it's just crazy to think what pieces they have there. It's like you'd have Jack Eichel there, you'd have Sam Reinhart, and then an Austin Matthews. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just... And then Ryan O'Reilly. I mean, where do you fit in all those centermen? Like, goodness.
That would make a pretty strong core there. I mean, you even got Evander Kane. Remember, he's not too old.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, if that was the case, if Buffalo got Austin Matthews, I would be hesitant to say I'd trade Sam Reinhart, because I think his value is lowered from when he got drafted.
You're right.
I mean, if you look at Sam Reinhart, he got drafted second overall right after Aaron Ekblad. Mm-hmm. We were discussing Jonathan Drouin, he got drafted third overall, but in terms of value, I think Jonathan Drouin has way more trade value at this point than Sam Reinhart.
You're right. Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
So I think if Buffalo got Matthews, I think they would have to push one of those guys to the wing, whether it's um, Reinhardt or maybe O'Reilly. O'Reilly's such a good two-way player.
He is.
I'd hate to see him on the wing. It makes more sense to have him on center.
Yeah, I wouldn't push him to the wing.
But it's just hard. It's just something they'd probably have to consider. It's definitely a good problem to have.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than having no pieces there. Another team that I could actually see maybe coming in last is Carolina, depending where they are going to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
If they're out of the playoffs and then they ship out Eric Staal and Cam Ward, then who do you have playing there? So I think they could just as easily slip. Like, they're not that far ahead of Buffalo or Columbus. I mean, they're only 5 points up on Buffalo. That's just like a couple wins and an overtime loss.
You can also see Philadelphia slipping down.
Yeah, that's
especially
true.
now.
Well, yeah. I agree with you there as well.
With the pieces they're losing, I can't really see anyone from the West coming in last. I mean, as a whole, the West is a weaker division this year, a weaker conference this year. I just think, in terms of the individual teams, I don't think any one of those teams is coming in last.
Yeah, I agree with you. And even the thing is with the lottery now, it's like even if you come in last, like there isn't a guaranteed. Yeah, so it's hard to say. I mean, if Edmonton, for example, comes third last, they could still have just as good as a chance to get Austin Matthews, and I don't even want to see that happen.
No,
that's not even fair if that happens.
No, that would,
But I agree with you. I think if we went on based on who gets Austin Matthews aka the first overall pick, just based on coming in last, I don't think it's anyone from the West.
Mm-hmm.
It's, in my opinion, it's definitely someone from the East. I mean, but Edmonton, it's just like, man, like, can they come in last again in the West? Like, what's going on there?
No, but then the crazy thing is they're only 3 points out of the playoff spot.
Exactly.
The last playoff spot that Calgary holds.
Yeah, the West is just crazy this year. I mean, I could see in the West maybe Vancouver coming in last. I could see things going off the rails there for some reason. Even Winnipeg, to be honest with you. I was just saying how Carolina, if they traded Staal and Ward, if Winnipeg isn't in a playoff spot or isn't close to a playoff spot by the trade deadline, I mean, if they ship out Ladd and Bufflin, then they have a weaker roster there too. So
that's true. It is going to be interesting what Winnipeg does do with their roster, because they're, in my opinion, they're just a goaltender away.
I mean,
it always has been that.
I totally agree with you, but watching Hellebuyck, I mean, he's looking solid. To me,
that's what we said about Hutchinson, though.
Exactly, but
that's what we said about Pavlik.
No, that is true, but Hellebuyck kind of reminds me of John Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're Winnipeg, I think next year, I think you try to get rid of Pavlik, you move on from Hutchinson. I think you have Hellebuyck there, and then you try to find yourself a goalie like we mentioned last week, like maybe a Cam Ward. Comes in, insulates him, or even a James Reimer, a 1A, 1B duo. I think, I don't know if, it's hard to say because he's an unproven commodity, but I think Hellebuyck will be a good goalie, and they should focus on making him their goalie of the future.
It remains to be seen, because in my opinion, we see this a lot now. I mean, if you look at Tokorski, what was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah. In
the playoffs, where is he now? I don't understand why Montreal hasn't been playing him as much. I mean, you can look at a team like Anaheim. They got 2 goalies. One of them obviously has to go.
Yeah,
so you have 2 very potential number ones.
That's a good point. Yeah.
The goaltending, it's going to be a carousel.
It is. I mean, there's so much, I think, quality goaltending out there now that you almost feel bad. We feel bad for the goalies. Like, I mean, there's probably there's a lot of NHL caliber goaltenders out there. There just isn't enough jobs, so it's definitely interesting to see what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think you're definitely gonna see a few veterans lose their job next year. Yeah, there's so much talent.
I agree. I mean, if it was a 40-team league, then maybe you'd say there'd be enough jobs going around for the talent. Just
add the 2 more teams for me. I'll be happy.
Yeah.
Do you think Tampa Bay makes the playoffs?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure what I said last week. I mean, just basically scrolling through the East and more specifically the Atlantic Division. Tampa sits at 42 points right now, and what are they? They're
5 points.
Yeah, they're 5 points out of a playoff spot, or they're
Well,
5 points out of the third
out of the
spot in their
sorry,
division.
yeah.
They're 2 points out of a wild card, and they sit at 11th place in the East. I mean, it's hard to say at this point. They're just so tight there. Like, but I just think there's too much distraction surrounding the team right now. So if you see if you see the two teams up ahead of them, Pittsburgh and Ottawa, start to pull away, then I think they'll be out of the playoff spot. But if they kind of avoid these distractions the next few weeks, I think they should be able to pull in, because Ottawa, to me, is just like not enough consistency. I'd love to see them going, especially because they're my favorite team and what they did last year, but they're just very inconsistent right now. So I could see maybe Tampa taking their spot.
I don't know. I personally don't think Tampa Bay is going to make the playoffs this year, and I will tell you, I think it's best that they don't. I think this is a team that needs to take a step back and just look at themselves. They need to reevaluate. They do actually have a lot of RFAs this coming season, and we all know the Stamkos situation now. All of a sudden, the Drouin situation. I think this is a team that needs to figure it out. I'm not saying making the playoffs would be bad for them, but I just don't think they're consistent enough to even deserve to make the playoffs, to be honest.
But I agree with you there. Definitely, they're not consistent, but neither is Ottawa. Pittsburgh's not being consistent.
No.
However, I can see Pittsburgh sliding in, and then you look at Boston's roster. I mean, they just went through an overhaul in the summer. I could see the potential of them missing the playoffs there. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're out.
Yeah, I guess that what that depends on is New Jersey going to stay hot?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with all these teams we just mentioned there, it's just hard to say. I mean, even if you look at top teams, like Florida's kind of running away with it now, but I mean, 2 weeks ago they were below Montreal, so it's just hit or miss with both conferences, and I think that's the great thing about the league. There's so much parity now; it just keeps you in your seat every night.
That's true. I mean, up to this point, you can still say every team's still in it.
Exactly, and then you
maybe minus Columbus and Buffalo.
And yeah, like Columbus and Buffalo for me in the East, I would say they're out. I mean, Toronto's just been playing so great.
Yeah. And
I think their schedule gets easier. I mean, I would not be shocked if somehow all the teams ahead of them derail and then they sneak in. I mean, that'd be something to see. I would not want that to happen, but hey.
Think about what it takes. If Bernie or if Reimer comes back and they get hot, that is all they're missing.
Exactly. I mean, all they need to do is pull a Florida. It's not an easy thing to do,
No.
but you just somehow need to get lucky. I mean, Toronto's last 10 is 6-2-2. I mean,
had Bernie just won half his starts
before
he lost 10 in a row, they would be in a spot right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the East, honestly, any team for me is in it right now, except Buffalo, Columbus. But like, there's some stories there. Like, I don't see Philadelphia making it.
No.
I think they just don't have the structure there. Neither Carolina. But in the West, I mean, like we said before, anyone in the Pacific has a shot. Los Angeles is the only team running away with it.
That's the only lock in that division.
And then in the Central, I mean, Dallas is the only lock in my opinion in terms of their first wild card spot. But like, you look at Chicago, St. Louis, they're at 51 and 50.1 points respectively, but Minnesota is in that first wild card spot with 49 points. I mean, they could overtake either of those teams. They have less games played. And I mean, I see Nashville. I don't see them. I see them in a wild card spot, but you never know now that they got Johansen.
No, and you know what? What this is showing me, I'm talking about the Western Conference playoff picture. Just how I don't like this format. I mean, two of these Pacific teams don't deserve to be there. You know, I'm a Flames fan, and I gotta say, it's just uneasy. I mean, yeah, point wise they're up there, but if you look at Minnesota, Nashville, these are teams that are potentially not going to have home ice just because they're in the Central Division, which is absolutely stacked.
I agree.
It's probably the best division right now.
I agree with you there. I mean, but you also have to consider the conference format. There's 16 teams in the East and 14 in the West.
That's the thing. Yeah.
So just imagine if Detroit was still in the West. For example, say Detroit was in the West, and then one of those Central teams is back in the Pacific. Say, I don't know, let's say Dallas, for example.
Yeah.
If you see Dallas in the Central now, then you have Los Angeles, Dallas as your top two teams, and you only have one weaker team in that third spot in the division, because then Detroit would be in the Central and they would have a spot. So I think they need to address the issue with the 14-16 format. Like, maybe do you look at the top 3 teams from each division making it, and then you have like 4 wild card spots open but then that would just maybe you wouldn't like that, because then why do I want home ice advantage if I'm facing a wild card team that's all the way in the West and I'm an Eastern team?
Well, so look at it this way. I actually really like the NBA's format of how they've gone. They, regardless of where you finish in the division, it's just ranked 1 to 8.
Okay.
I like that format.
That makes sense.
I feel like that would work, the NHL, despite having the unbalanced conferences.
The only thing, I don't know, I just think it's unfair. I mean, though, you can argue West is stronger than the East, but I mean, the numbers are right there. It's 16 teams, 14 teams.
Mm-hmm.
You look at a team like last year, like if it wasn't 16 and 14, you look at a team like Boston, they would have been in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I just think that's an unfair disadvantage to the Eastern Conference, and that's something they need to address. Maybe they address it if they have an expansion or something. I don't know, but
just bring in 2 more teams, have it at 32 like the NFL, and it'll be good.
But if you bring in 2 more teams, who are they talking? They're talking, it's Quebec and Las Vegas, right?
Well, right now, what I think they're waiting for is Seattle, because they're looking for 2 Western teams, in my opinion, and I don't think they want another Canadian team.
Well, I agree with you there, but I mean, like, come on, these guys paid $500 million just down payment, and then you're gonna tell them you can't have a team?
Yeah,
that's crazy. That's just a money grab to me. However, Quebec being there, I'm not concerned with Montreal because they have such a legitimate fan base. I'm more concerned with Ottawa.
Yeah.
Ottawa, so they've had troubles getting attendance before, and now if you have Quebec, maybe you get old Nordique fans going back to cheering for the new Quebec team. And I don't really see how Quebec being there fixes the conference issues, because then you're going to have to move an Eastern team back to the West. I think, logistically speaking, it would make more sense to have a team in Seattle and Vegas. Mm-hmm. But that's yet to be seen.
They're just waiting for the right buyer.
Yeah, it's too hard to speculate on that right now. And I don't... You could always say, Arizona would move, but if Arizona moves, they're just going to move somewhere in the West, so that doesn't fix the issue either.
That's true. Is there anything else you got?
I think we've touched on every thing this week.
All right, perfect. Thanks for tuning into another NHL OPENions podcast, guys. Until next time.